So the first question is, did you find procurement or did procurement find you?
Well, in anticipation, I spent a lot of time thinking about this, and I guess I have a few answers to that. That
Hmm.
in the first part, certainly it found me.
Yeah.
So I was working in a warehouse for a company. Long story how I got there, but eventually a job came up in procurement or purchasing once I'd finished my university degree while I was working in the warehouse, and I jumped at it with all arms. So I did that for a few years and left the field and went and did, I guess, some production planning and
Hmm.
logistics and warehousing. And then I found myself full circle back into procurement again. So I guess in the first instance, it found me, but
Yeah.
then I went back to it. And then probably a third answer is that right now, doing things like having this discussion with you is me doubling down, going, I really enjoy procurement
Hmm.
and I really want to be part of this culture. So for me, I think it's more of a case of I've found procurement myself because I want
Yeah.
to double down and get more involved in it.
Now, I know that the conversation today we're going to have is really about relationship building and also professionalism within procurement and within our day jobs. And I just wonder, like, kick things off with a question about experience, like customer experience. I think of customer procurement and relationships all go down to how do people feel about how they work with us and the experience they have, having worked with us. How do you want people that you've worked with to perceive the role of procurement?
Procurement to me is an exciting opportunity. It really is an opportunity to learn and to see different things across the globe, but within your organization as well. We have a lot of changing dynamics from my perspective, really in the last 5 to 10 years on what we need to focus on. And
Hmm.
sometimes stakeholders won't necessarily understand that. So the obvious approach for procurement is, get it for me cheaper and get it for me quicker and make sure it's not broken.
Yeah.
But there's so much more to it from us and through all of your podcasts and all of your guests, it's all about ESG. What are we doing about data management and systems,
Hmm.
risk management? They're all the things for me that have been, I guess, I won't say introduced, but certainly become more front of mind for me as a procurement practitioner and the things I
Hmm.
need to watch in, I guess my strategy, my month to month plan. So trying to get people to understand that, but also trying to build up some excitement with people around the procurement team that
Yeah.
this is a pretty fun place to work, right? The things that I've been able to do, go and see supplier factories, how things are made.
Hmm.
There's people in these businesses that are just so excited about the little things in the supply chain that you had no idea even existed, but they spend their whole life trying to perfect this little thing that has this flow-on effect to the product you're buying or something that's out in the market. So seeing that, seeing scale of production, the big thing for me, the opportunities to travel are amazing.
Hmm.
Into Norway, Germany, China, Vietnam, Malaysia, New Zealand. For the most part, most of those places I would not have been to if it wasn't
Yeah.
for my role in procurement. So to get the opportunity to go and see different cultures, different environments, different people, different ways of working, super exciting. And that's what really drives me. And that's why I'm doubling down. I just really want to deal more with it. So I guess how do we want people to feel about it? We want people to feel like we're inquisitive. We want to learn more. We want to understand more about our suppliers. So then we can bring that back to the business or to the
Yeah.
stakeholders to develop a better product or service or I guess result for the business.
And I think picking up on something you said there was about, it's more than just we're here to the perception that we're here to beat up suppliers and save them some money, but there's actually a lot more value that we can bring to them beyond that as they're looking for help in terms of how they use their suppliers to achieve their objectives.
Yes, certainly, certainly. I guess the perception of just having to chase cost all the time doesn't really feel like a fun activity to do, albeit you've still got to be quite skilled at it. But
Yeah.
there's many ways to skin that cat. You've got to work with your suppliers for them to understand that, hey, we need to bring costs down. And most of the time, if you have that openness and that good collaboration, then you're going to find ways to do it through their
Mhm.
supply chain and your own supply chain, as opposed to beating your chest and stamping your hand on the desk saying, give me a price discount. It's short term. It won't last, and you'll end up with less supplies to be able to build value.
So what's your approach to building relationships with stakeholders internally?
Oh, my approach is really simple. I just get out of my seat, take
Yeah.
myself out of my comfort zone, and go and introduce yourself. Be a part of other people's teams, even if it's not directly related to what you're doing. You've got to go out with that mindset of, I want to learn something new. I want
Mhm.
to be a part of the whole team. I guess with every business, there's always silo mentality, and it's not intentional. It's just they're the things I've got to focus on. So for me personally, go and understand what other people in the business are doing.
Yeah.
Sit in their team meetings every now and again, but also mix it with some of that formal things and informal things. I've got in my calendar every Wednesday morning a coffee chat.
Yep.
It's not scheduled, but it's not, I don't have a diary of who I'm going to visit, but it's a reminder that, hey, you've got to go and have a coffee with someone. So whether
Mhm.
you pick up your own coffee, go sit in their desk, or you pre-organize saying, hey, can we go to the cafe and have a coffee together, and just mix, bring in that informal nature and that relationship. So for me, I guess the 2 points are, you've got to be active, you've got to get out of your seat, but you've got to put yourself out of your comfort zone as well, right? People aren't necessarily going to come to you.
How do you? Because I remember earlier in my career when we had a new leader that came to the organization that I was working on, and one of our metrics was how many coffees did we have with stakeholders?
Wow.
Because they were trying to drive this engagement. And for me, as the certainly at the time, I think I just hide it a little bit better now, but the classic introvert, who much would rather be sitting behind my computer, in a spreadsheet, found that very uncomfortable. I was like, this is awful. That I've got to go and it's funny. I was always strong at building relationships, so I didn't feel them forced. So I guess where I'm going is, like, when you know that you've got that time, you got to go and find someone to speak to. Like, what premise do you use to go and have that conversation where you're not feeling? Because I would feel, oh, I don't want to burden them or impinge on them, or they're going to think I'm crazy. Like, why the heck do I want to go and speak to them? So any tips or tactics on the premise you use to get in front of them, I think, would be gratefully
Yeah.
received.
Yeah. Look, I share the same feelings, to be honest, Philip. It's that you don't want to be a burden. That's something that crosses my mind a lot. But as I said before, you just got to step outside your
Yeah.
comfort zone. We're creatures of wanting to build relationships. So get out there and just chat with people. Ask questions. Have a set of questions that you want
Mhm.
to ask this person, a mix of outside of work, but also a mix of, hey, tell us about what you're doing in your business or in your team. You know, it's easy for people to break down that barrier of, this feels awkward, if you've got a couple of predefined questions, I guess, that help them discover, or sorry, to discuss, but for you to discover
Yeah.
what's happening.
I think also, so somebody who's far smarter at sales than I ever will be taught me about the importance of rapport, and rapport at the beginning of a sales conversation. And I think that what we're trying to do is we're trying to sell the procurement value proposition. We're trying to sell procurement services on people that we want to work with. And that requires research, and it requires trying to get to know and understand the person that you're going to be meeting with, and not just from a business perspective, but perhaps from a personal perspective as well, or one or two nuggets, like finding one or two nuggets where there's a connection that you can talk to. And again, I think back to my time, and I would go into these meetings and try and wing it. And you realize that, winging it is not necessarily a good strategy, and that you do need to do some research to find points of connection with people before these kind of conversations.
Yeah, look, I think one of procurement's superpowers is that research, and it's almost scope development when
Mm-hmm.
you're going into a meeting, right? It's like, what am I going to discuss? What are the things I need to achieve out of this? How am I going to interact with this person? Or what are the hot topics? Or what are the pain points, right? I've found throughout my career, even some of the most difficult conversations that you're really worried about having, because there may be a bit of conflict or there may be things unsaid, the best way to go about it is just be open and say, hey, look, I'm really uncomfortable about this,
Yeah.
but I just want to bring it up with you, and
Yeah.
let's have a chat about it and work it out. And from that point on, you can have really solid relationships and stakeholder management. So shouldn't be afraid to step out, but certainly doing a bit of research beforehand never ever hurts.
Do you follow the same kind of process for building relationship with suppliers? And I think when I think of suppliers, it's not just suppliers that you work with today, but suppliers that you're getting to know, that you're wanting to get to know, when you think about it from a supplier development perspective. Because, I hear a lot of times, I don't want to get too friendly with my supplier. And, and I certainly felt that as well.
Yep.
But relationship, great supplier relationships are built on that kind of personal. At the end of the day, everything's one-to-one.
Yeah, look, the saying that always comes up in my head is people buy from people they like.
Yeah.
And as much as we'd like to think it's not true because we should be professional, it certainly sticks there. So if you're an aggressive person, or you're one-sided, or you're not collaborative, people tend to want to not work with you. So I think it works both ways, right?
Mm-hmm.
With your customer stakeholders, but also with your suppliers. So coming back to your comment around, keeping a supplier at arm's length, not wanting to give them too much away. I think that there's a balance there, right? We've all seen or heard the case studies from some of the car manufacturers that would embed the suppliers into their business because they need them to be a part of it. And certainly for some instances, there's an opportunity for that. But I guess the thing that we've got to do best is maintain a little bit of competitive pressure.
Yeah.
So if you get too close and make them too comfortable, it can be difficult to address some opportunities. So for me, internal versus suppliers definitely manage a little bit differently. I think the importance on research is probably more elevated when you come to suppliers. If I've got a supplier coming in, particularly if it's an executive coming in, you want to make sure you've done your research.
Yeah.
If they've got online information, whether it's a quarterly report or an annual report, go and have a read of it. Even if it's 5 minutes, just grab some of the snippets. It gives you an opportunity to be able to, I guess, collaborate a little bit more with them and speak the same language. So my approach to a supplier meeting is always prepare. You must prepare, even if it's 5 minutes.
Yeah.
If it's my team that are bringing in a supplier, my favorite thing to do is walk into their office and go, "Hey, what's the hot topics? What are they gonna bring up? What's that thing that's on their mind that they need to talk about?" So I'm not blindsided by it. We can do a little bit of prep for it. So I guess that's how I would approach the suppliers.
Yeah, and today, when you look at the generative AI tools that we mostly have access to, just putting you talk about financial reports, and these financial reports can be pretty long, and detailed affairs. I mean, you can pop something in there and ask questions in a ChatGPT or a Gemini, or, insert your tool of choice and understand pretty quickly what the pain points in the business are, and even have some pointed questions that might help you with information prior to negotiations.
Yeah. Oh, this is the biggest revelation for me. And I know everyone's talked about it, but it's what an amazing tool it is. And if you're not using it, please start, and it starts from very simple things like just asking questions about a company, or when you're building the scope for sourcing activity is, "Hey, I'm about to go and source notebooks.
Yeah.
So tell me about notebooks. What are
Yeah.
the key things that I need to understand about notebooks when I'm comparing different vendors?" And bang, 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 bang. Okay, I don't need to spend 2 weeks discussing with suppliers or just researching, discussing with. It's there. It's
Yeah.
wow. So to have that tool available, so powerful. I'm a really big fan. At first it felt like you were cheating a little bit, like, "Oh, I might," but
Yeah.
but now if you're not using it, you're cheating yourself because it's there, it's available.
When you look at things, and it's kind of off topic a little bit, but I think about deep research, for example, which I use within ChatGPT, and some of the responses to that are mind blowing in such a short period of time. Now, the trick is being able to interpret, what's the right word, like the hallucinations sometimes that AI makes versus what the real data and the real data sources and how it's been cited and things like that. But you can just get such ahead of the game, even if it just gives you a starting point for further research, than if you've just got a blank piece of paper. Whereby I certainly think about it when I've got a challenge or a problem or an opportunity or something like that. my first thing is to go and, have a chat with myself in GPT, and it just gives me some inspiration of how I should be thinking about something.
Yeah, and I think even more off topic, just the nature of the beast to be able to solve, well, not solve, but at least research things like cancer,
Yeah.
understanding different treatments. You know, bring that back to procurement though. It gives you such a powerful tool to be able to learn even more and to make yourself more professional.
So I know that professionalism is a big theme of your focus, and that there's that. We talked a little bit about the balance of building close relationships with suppliers, but still maintaining that kind of arm's length. And I think that the case is a little bit. You still have to consider this for stakeholders, because we don't want to. There has to be some tension with stakeholders as well. It's not just that we're here to say yes, yes, yes to everything that the stakeholder wants, because we have other perspectives to bring. I wonder if you could talk a little bit about, what kind of professionalism or formal kind of professionalism means to you, and that how you encourage your team to think about it.
Sure. My number one rule for being a professional procurement person is to be fair and consistent.
Mm-hmm.
You've got to be fair and consistent with every supplier. You've got to give every supplier the same opportunity, the same amount of time, and the same pieces of information. So you've got a level playing field. That's just, I guess, the game that you've got to play, but it also makes sure that everyone's talking the same language. The superpower, as I've said before, for us is that scope development.
Yeah.
So working with the right people, making sure that you've got a really clear scope. And maybe it's going to take you longer to get that scope than what you anticipated, but there's never been a time where you've spent more time pulling a scope together and being disappointed, because you've got a real understanding of what you need. So
Mm-hmm.
professionalism for me is to spend time up front, get it right. What is it actually you need, stakeholder? But then making sure that the market's got exactly the same information throughout the whole process. And closing out is also a really important part for me. Nobody likes to be left in the lurch. It
Yeah.
shows a lot of respect to suppliers when you
Yeah.
can give them an honest feedback about, hey, look, you didn't win, but these are the reasons you didn't win. It could be cost, it could be other things, but yes, you're disappointed, Mr. or Mrs. Supplier, but this is the reality of it. So next time when this opportunity comes around, at least you're aware.
I want to come back to that in a second. I just want to focus on kind of the transparency that you referenced, because I think about, now I'm on the other side of the table. You kind of see the errors of my own ways as well, or the frustrations of my own ways. And I know that it's easy sometimes to try and keep, when we talk about arm's length, but also to try and, we've got to control our stakeholders in not talking to people, and you don't necessarily want to give information that gives other people where you think is, an advantage over somebody else. But that transparency to suppliers who are going through the process is so important, because if you don't give it to them, they're like, why should they put their best foot forward if they feel as though they're just being taken through a process, with a limited amount of ability to influence the outcome?
Yeah, exactly. And suppliers aren't silly. They deal with this day in, day out. The salespeople deal with this all the time. So
Mm-hmm.
they can see a good process compared to another. I've had suppliers come to me before and go, geez, I really just didn't think we were a part of this, because the opportunity wasn't as clearly defined as
Yeah.
what we expected. But yeah, it's really important to get that right.
And the feedback is so important. I did a whole podcast on this last year that was probably triggered. I was triggered by some event that we'd gone through where there was no feedback. And because I'm a procurement person, I felt comfortable in being relatively aggressive in pushing back. In fact, it happened a couple of times in relatively short order. And basically trying to make clear that we've invested all this time, and just saying no, you're not going to move forward, wasn't acceptable to me. Wasn't that it's not acceptable, because it's, if that's all that's going to be offered, that's all that's going to be offered. But it would be very helpful and valuable if we could get feedback. So I was able to push pretty aggressively to get that feedback. But most suppliers aren't necessarily going to go and do that. However, they invest. What I missed when I was a practitioner, I missed how much money people invest in putting together proposals. And so for them, if they don't win the business, which is obviously they invest because they want to win the business, but they can see it as an investment well spent if they get some really valuable feedback that's going to help them, in the market. Not necessarily even next time with you, if there is a next time with you, but just give them a little bit more competitive insight on where their positioning is and where they fell short.
Yeah, and I think coming back to the first topic we talked about with stakeholder engagement, I've never had a disappointed supplier ever that's said, geez, I wish you didn't come to us too early and discuss this proposed sourcing activity you're going to do. The earlier you can get into those discussions with the supplier, not only benefits them because they get to understand your business, but you get to understand their business a little bit more, and it helps craft your sourcing activity. So the earlier the better, but all of these relationships are really important. If they're good people, they'll take good feedback, and they can be a source of leverage or a source of information in the future. So you've really got to respect the time that the salespeople put into it. They've got a role to perform as well, and reputation matters.
Yeah, and if you find yourself working, in a similar category from one organization to another organization, at the end of the day, it's a relatively small world out there, and paths may cross again.
They do a lot, I must say.
Well, Michael, I want to thank you so much for joining me on the podcast to talk a little bit about kind of your thoughts on relationships and tips on how we can really strengthen the relationships, both with stakeholders, also really important with suppliers. I think what you talked about, the process and that transparency and feedback in the procurement, in the sourcing process, so important. So I appreciate your time. If anybody would like to reach out directly and connect, what's the easiest way for them to go and do that?
I would love to say get out of your seat and come and see me, but if that's not possible, of course, LinkedIn's the best place. But
who doesn't want a trip to Melbourne?
Well, it's cooling down at the moment, so not a lot of people, but no, just LinkedIn is perfect, mate. But absolutely welcome anybody reach out and have a chat about procurement anytime. And really thank you for your time, Philip. It's been a really good chat.
All right, appreciate it. Thanks a lot for your time, Michael, and we will talk again soon.